Hello, I'm J. Cole Thomas, and this is
Mario Hudson.
we have a weekly show of what we call, or I've been calling, spiritual perspectives. I don't know what Mario
It's good enough for me. It's good enough for me.
has wanted to call it. But what we do is present our individual perspectives on spiritual topics, I'll say, religious topics as well. You know, I believe spirituality is simply the other side of religion. And for me, because people don't separate them out, they don't get a clearer understanding. Sorry, but a clearer understanding of what it is they're even believing in. And so we like to just sit up and have these weekly discussions. Mario has been a gracious friend of mine for I don't even know how many years now. You know,
Yeah, too many to count. Right? It's been good.
where we've done this just on a regular basis, just as friends to have this discussion. And he's been respectful enough not to try and beat me over the head, which has allowed our dialogue to be this great growing and learning experience. And so I've always wanted to include other people in on it.
Well, you know, the reality, Jay, is that the Bible encourages us to always be willing to take the opportunity to share with others the reason for our beliefs. And that's why I enjoy this, because it's not a question of debates or challenges, but it's a question of sharing the reason, the purpose, and the way we have arrived to the decisions that we made. You know, it's really interesting, because one of the articles I read a few days ago, I found it. It's an old article from 2012 that talks about 310 million people, 310 million religions. And it talks about exactly what you've said. People shaping their thinking in terms of spirituality to define what their standards are, what they want to believe, how they want to serve God.
Interesting.
So with that in mind, you know, one of the things that you and I always talk about, and I find it fascinating, is that is there a way to truth? Is there a way to God? Is there a way of God? And that's the one of the elements that drives me and drives my desire to search and learn, because I truly believe that there is a way of God. And I believe today there's a lot of ways to God, which not necessarily are ways of God. So if we look at the plethora of religions and pathways that exist today, that all defines to going and directing us to the same God, I find that interesting. I find it fascinating. And the question is it true?
Man, that's awesome. There's our topic, the way of God. Is there a way of determining truth, God's truth?
Yes.
This is something I think is basically the foundation of our conversations.
Right.
You know, almost as one thing that you told me just a short time ago, you know, is that, you know, Christians weren't even called Christians back in the early days of Christianity.
That's right.
They were people who
were in the way.
The
way of God.
Right. And something we've always discussed and agreed upon is that the way has been there before.
Yes, exactly.
There was supposedly, in my perspective, a Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's that thread of things that I've always researched and looked for my own for my own sense of things. Did other cultures also be able to find the way? And our way of knowing if they were able to do that would be, again, is something we were just talking about before we even started filming, is do they display love? Do they display a Christ-like mind, one of civility to one another, one that allows them to move forward in this great way?
Right.
And I believe that That's true, and you can find it in all cultures. Them being found and them being lost. Right? People finding the way and losing the way.
Correct.
And getting caught up in their own cultural ego, so to speak, to say that they wind up believing more in their own rituals and their own sense of things than God's way.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Absolutely, Jay. And you know, the interesting thing, as you pointed out, is as we go back to tracing the lineage of the way, you know, in the research and the perspective that I have, is the way was started in the garden. And that was the way of God, the way of Jehovah. He was provided Adam and Eve the path. If you recall the story of the garden and the story of the tree of life. So the tree of life was the way. Those were the principles, the values, the guidance provided by Jehovah God. Those ways, as you mentioned, was founded on love. The Bible said God is love. So those principles of the way of Jehovah is based on love. Now, if you also recall the story, there was another part of the story, the introduction of someone that said, yeah, I know he said that's the way, but you know, you can also redefine the way. You can decide for yourself. You can use your free will to choose how to serve God. That's the principle that was introduced in the Bible, in the Garden of Eden. And that's the principle, when I read that article I quoted earlier, 310 million people, 310 million, that's the same principle that was introduced in the Garden of Eden. Today, people are still listening to that side of the story, that message from Satan, that message from the first individual that decided to lose their way, to define their own way. Now, that person says it's the way to God, but it's not the way of God. See, and that's where a lot of people today, I believe, that they have this concept that this is the way to God. Now, again, that's what Satan tells them. They can decide for themselves how to serve God. Has God accepted that? I don't believe so.
You know, this is the point of this for me. You know, to go back to something like the garden. You know, as we talk about it from a linear perspective, to say lineage, I speak from a non-linear perspective, to say right now.
Okay.
And so, as I look at the story of the garden, I believe that to be right now. We exist in a garden. Now, people will say, you know, well, no, that's not true. Well, there's a difference in this garden between what is God and what is not God. What is God in this garden is the universe and how it works in its very perfection. If we choose the way, we will have a beautiful life, I'll say, one of understanding, not one of what we think it should be. That's up to God. But one of where we have an understanding of. If you can have an understanding of the life that you have, you won't have that worry, that sadness, that what, even when someone dies, if you understand that's the way. Everyone dies. Right. It's not this horrible thing.
Right.
And so as we even get into the snake within the garden, Satan within the garden, the ego within the garden right now, as people buy into who they believe they are, get lost in who they think they are, they get lost. They get lost in those 320 million ways. But there's only one way, and that's that, again, separate from the ego within right now, there's our spirit. There's how we feel, right? Do we understand our feelings? And so you say, you know, some people feel that they're doing something loving, right? But they can't, again, disseminate the difference between what is their ego and what is their spirit. Is it something that you're doing because you feel it's the right thing to do, or are you doing something because it is the right thing to do? And a lot of people, again, in this moment, in this garden, get lost and still listen to that snake, that ego, which I wouldn't call a person, as the devil again, because it's that individual. If you're lost in who you think you are and you're not understanding who we all are, all that same spirit, all that same love, then you approach people from that snake perspective.
Well, Jay is always come back to the Bible perspective. And the concept you talk about has a foundation in the Bible, because it talks about that spirit and the flesh. And it talks about that struggle that we all have between the spirit and the flesh. And it's a normal part of that human experience. And as you said, one of the things that is critical is us understanding the two, but most important, us deciding, or more, I won't say so deciding, but us determining which one of the two drives our lives. I believe we do that by as you would say, the choices we make. And the choices we make reflect the outcome. The challenge through that process, as I see with people, is that people do those things of the flesh. They feed the flesh, but they expect the spiritual outcome. Okay, so they want the result of the spiritual benefits, as the Bible says. They want the blessings, while pursuing acts that leads to malediction. And they in a lot of ways, they don't, as you said, they don't understand. They go through life in their misunderstanding of how these actions that they're taking are not yielding the results they're expecting. Again, simply because, as you said, it's their ego, is that I call it that Satan side of them, that part of them that's telling them, I can do it my way, and in doing it my way, I can get the results I want. So in effect, I'm going to trump God in the standards that he set. Like you said, this perfection that he's created, defining actions, reaction. In this perfection, I'm going to challenge that perfection, and I'm going to do what I want, and I'm going to get the result that God promised me by serving him in my own way. And as you said, today we see the result of everybody having their own way of serving God. We see the results. It's not a reflection of God's love. It's not a reflection of God's mercy. It's not a reflection of God's justice. It's a reflection of, for me, Satan's ego, Satan's influence, Satan's injustice, Satan's definition of love, which is selfishness.
Satan's definition of love. Definitely got back to that. One of the things you said of being able to determine the truth. How do we determine what is the way? What is the truth of things? Right. And as you said, we have our choices, and those choices yield our outcomes or our consequences, right? And for me, it's that simple determining, but that person still has to determine for themselves, right? From their own spirit through that ego, what is understanding and what is not understanding. Right? For me, that's how we determine what is the truth.
Right.
Do I understand my outcome? Do I not understand my outcome? It's not to say that my outcome was the right outcome, but it's understanding how I got there. what choice I made that led me to this outcome. And now, can I change my choices? Right? Given the free will I've been blessed with, can I change my choices and now not always find myself stepping in the mud, like going the wrong way? Right? Again, what's wrong in our way is what we don't understand. Doing this very thing, I'll say, for me, I don't necessarily feel it's a complete choosing of my own. It's me following the way set for me. I've been a kid from South Central LA, doing my thing, trying to drive my cool car, trying to have my cool job, trying to, look cool and be cool. And as I've progressed in age, progressed in understanding, what people used to tell me was the way, and they had no understanding of, I rejected my entire life mostly. It's within these past probably 10, 15 years have I begun to say, there is a way. It's just people don't understand what it is that they're talking about. And for me, it has boiled down to the simplicity of right now, of again, understanding my choices, understanding the outcomes, the very things that I have in my life. So many people are complaining about their lives simply because they don't understand what choices they've been making. And that's for me how you can determine the way.
You said a number of things, and I'm trying to reel them through my head, because earlier you used the term feel and know. Then you use the term can and should. Can I change my choice? Or should I change my choice? That's the point.
I agree.
Because as you said, one of the beautiful things that you said here, and I think is fundamental, is your pursuit of understanding started with pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of wisdom. And as the Bible said, that's what we have to do. Wisdom.
It was a pursuit of knowledge.
Knowledge.
Wisdom is the execution of knowledge.
Granted. Pursuit of knowledge. Okay. And then the application of that knowledge in your life. Okay. And in effect, in harmony with principles outlined in the Bible. That's what the Bible encourages us to do. Search, seek, gain that knowledge, gain that understanding. And then, as you mentioned, as you began you started to do, is then apply that understanding to your life. Apply that understanding to the results, the outcomes that you see. Okay, I made this choice. This was the outcome. Okay. My understanding when I made the choice was this, and that's how I got there. My new understanding now is this. So I understand if I made a different choice, I would have gotten a different result. So to the point, can I change my choice? Yes. That's not the problem. The problem for most people is, should they change their choice? As I've shared with you, I went through the same process of seeking knowledge, seeking truth. And as I gained that knowledge, I realized that I had to change my choice. There wasn't even a choice that I had. It was required. I had to change my choice in order to achieve the outcome that I desired based on the new knowledge. Recognizing, there's a common saying, that if you keep doing the same thing you're doing, you're going to get the same results. That's why I go back to the fact that it wasn't really a choice. The reality is, yes, we can change our choice. Yes, we should change our choice. But the reality is, if we want to have the outcome defined by God, if we want to live a life, a Christ-like life, that we must change our choice. We must adjust our thinking. We must shift our paradigm to align with the mind of Christ. Because as you said, that's our goal. Our goal is to live a life, is to apply those principles that Christ taught, that Jesus taught as a man, that Christ or God, Jesus is pre-existent in heaven as the Word, which again, as the Word defined the way, the principles, the guidance, the values. He represents, as the Bible said, he's a reflection of the true God. He's a reflection of the qualities and principles. In heaven, he presented that to the angelic followers or the angelic angels. On earth, he brought the same principles here. Presented the same principles from a human perspective. The principle of love, the principle of in your term, I'm not sure I'm using it the way you define, but the principle of balance, the principle of priority, the principle of putting the kingdom first, or putting the values of God ahead of your own selfish desire. See, that's the goal that we have to strive for. In today, that battle of the flesh and of the spirit, as I say, it's that battle between God and Satan. It's a battle I feel between love and selfishness. It's a battle that I feel between a successful, happy life now and one provided or promised in the future, or a life today full of pain and challenges and difficulties, as you said, that we don't understand. But the other thing I wanted to touch base on, and I'm not clear on it. You talk about predestination?
Predestination?
Yeah, did I hear you say that this that we're doing is something that you feel has been predestined for you, or what do you mean? I wasn't clear on that, so help me understand that a little bit.
Predestination. In talking about finding harmony, finding balance, finding that middle ground within what I'll say is the struggle between ego and spirit. It's not that I feel this was predestined. It's that I feel that this is where, in order to find my own balance, my own harmony within my own life, this was something that I've been guided to. Okay. And so as I've had this struggle to find out, what choices should I make, I've had to, again, in my understanding, in my knowledge, is find equal footing, harmony within my life, a sense of what is not necessarily about me. And as this has to be that duality of where it has to be about you, because you've got family, you've got whatever, and so you got to find that middle ground. But at the same time, you have to serve something higher, something that's not you. Something that's not just about you looking good, something that's about you sharing where you've been, what you've done, who you are. Well, the one thing a lot of people do within this life is hide from who they are. They go around with this shield up, pretending to be perfection, as opposed to just simply being that perfection. Within our individual scars, hurt, and so on and so forth is a story that helps someone else. And so it's not that we stand here scarred up, bruised, and this horrible person, but we stand here as a reflection of the struggle that we've been through, that we all go through within this life. And so as we talk about being able to find this harmony, be able to reflect perfection that we live in, right? To find that this perfection exists within this moment, within this life, within this world, that again, the universe don't operate for itself. It operates again within this harmony, that if we just a little bit closer to the sun, it could burn us up. If we move just a little bit farther from the sun, it would freeze us. We happen to exist in what scientists call this Goldilocks paradigm, of where everything seems to be perfectly suited for us.
Right.
And so it's simple acceptance and examination of this perfection that once we are aware of that we exist in, that we must reflect within our own selves. That if we don't reflect that perfection that we see, we throw ourselves and our very garden into imbalance, into disharmony, into disarray. And so in a sense of, again, how do I determine if I should change my choices? Is that within harmony? Is that within an understanding? Does that land well for not just me, but for also those people around me? Does it reflect positivity within, again, not just me, but all those around me? Sometimes we can say, oh man, I made a bunch of money, but I actually took a bunch of money from those people around me, as opposed to saying, we made a bunch of money. Right? One is about selfishness, and one is about the harmony of the love of everything and everyone around you.
Right.